What's up, model pals? In this video I'm building Monogram's Porsche March IndyCar for the Porsche Group Build, hosted by the Scale Model Car podcast. Having never built a single-seater before, I reached out to my friend Kyle from Arcady Scaleworks here on YouTube. I will link his channel in the video description. Be sure you go and check him out. His advice was that if I was going to try to eliminate the seam line where the nose cone goes onto the floor, that I needed to install the cockpit first. Unfortunately, in the end, I didn't do a very good job of eliminating that seam, but it was still a good exercise, and I learned a lot for what I can do next time on some future projects where hopefully I can get that area cleaned up a little bit better. Thanks again, Kyle, for all your advice on this project. I really appreciate it. You were always available to me when I had questions and really helped me along with this project. Tester's aluminum was used to pick out a few details and break up some of the monotony of the black on the interior tub. The interior tub is not very detailed on this kit. It does come with a driver figure that can be installed, so because of that there's no seat or harnesses or anything like that, which this kit could really benefit from. I may look at 3D printing and adding those at some point in the future, but being my first single-seater, I wanted to just keep this out of the box so that I could learn for future projects that I have planned with some other 1980s Indy cars. Keeping with the theme of lack of detail for the cockpit, there are no gauge decals, so I used some of that Tester's aluminum dry brushed onto the gauges to pick them out a little bit, and then used Tamiya's X22 clear gloss to create the illusion of glass over the gauge faces. The seam between the floor and the nose cone that you can see here can definitely be cleaned up. I made an attempt, but didn't do a very good job, unfortunately. I certainly could have done a better job, I just didn't really spend enough time on it. And when I primed, it was still there, and I decided I didn't want to go back and try fixing it at that point. But it's certainly doable, and now with a little bit more experience, hopefully I can eliminate it on a future project. I moved on to the engine next. I wanted to take some creative liberties here, I'll be honest, and use some different metallic colors that I had and see if I could get some contrast between those. So the engine is certainly not painted very accurately, but that's okay. Things were going pretty well until it finally happened. As you can tell from my reaction, that was the first time that I've managed to spill my glue in almost 4 years in this hobby now. It was bound to happen eventually, which is why I reacted that way. They say there's only two kinds of modelers, those that have spilled their glue and those that will. So I've now moved up from those that will to those that have. As I mentioned on the engine, I used a variety of different metallic colors as well as some clear colors like clear brown and smoke to create some subtle differences between the various parts. Unfortunately on the camera it doesn't pick up very well. I've noticed that my phone camera, the sensor, has a lot of trouble picking up metallic colors. It kind of distorts the image a little bit and they all blend together. But in person, to the human eye, you can kind of see it. It's not quite as stark or noticeable as I would have hoped. So some good practice, and I'll have to see if there's some ways to maybe exemplify the differences in the colors a little bit more in the future. Before I installed the side pods, I needed to paint the inside of those areas as I wouldn't be able to access them later. I also needed to paint and install the various components that go inside of the side pods, like the radiator and what I assume is an intercooler for the turbocharger, although I'll be honest, I'm not 100% certain. Before painting the area that was going to be inside the side pods, I had test fit them, and that's why you saw tape along the side of the nose cone, because I wanted to be able to use the styrene cement to secure the side pods in place, and if there was paint there, it wouldn't stick very well. So that's why I carefully taped off and sprayed and then removed the tape, so that way I'd have a nice clean gluing line. Spraying white primer straight over white plastic and then spraying white paint over white primer proved to be pretty challenging. Luckily I didn't end up with any runs anywhere or anything like that, but in hindsight I think I probably would have been better off priming in gray and then painting the white color. I still think it would have covered just fine. I did want a very bright white. This car was a very bright white color, but it turned out to be just really difficult to see where I was spraying this gloss white paint and whether or not I was getting good even coverage. In the end it worked out okay, but being able to see it visually as it goes on the model is quite tricky. If you have any tips or tricks on how I might be able to see that better in the future, please let me know in the comments. After testing a few different greens that I had in my collection, I found that Tamiya's X28 was pretty close to the decals. It's slightly more yellow, I think, than the Quaker State green, but it was close enough. Since I was going to be using the oval aero package, there was very little decal that actually had the green on it that needed to match, so the very subtle difference really isn't that noticeable in the end. With this kit being 35 years old now, the decals were slightly yellowed, not too bad. I did hang them in the window for a few days and you can see they turned a little bit more transparent. Unfortunately, the decals were still quite challenging to put on. The glue flaked off the back of most of them, floated around in the water, so getting them secured on the model was a little bit tricky. With the setting solvents, they unfortunately wrinkled up a little bit in a few spots, and the decals are pretty badly out of register from the factory. I probably should have invested in a set of replacement aftermarket decals, but I just decided to go with the kit decals on this one since this was all going to be a learning experience anyway, and I wasn't too concerned about the end result. I did have to take some creative liberties with the gold stripes. The Porsche logo stripes go around the front of the side pod, and then there is one long double gold stripe decal that's supposed to go all the way around the nose cone along the demarcation line between the white and the green. But I knew there was no way that I was ever going to get that decal down and smoothed out, so took some creative liberties, and as you saw, I cut the gold stripes before they wrap around the front of the side pod, which is not entirely accurate to the real model, but I think in the end it saved me a heck of a lot of pain and probably messing the decals up far worse than it looks without them. I gotta be honest, I was rather shocked that these decals that go up and around the engine cover lined up as well as they did, because I totally eyeballed the masking job for the demarcation with the green, and it ended up being almost spot on, so I guess I had a decent eye for that, luckily. If you've watched any of my previous car model videos, you know that after I clear coat, I tend to wet sand and then polish out the gloss clear. I chose not to do that on this model. I just didn't really feel like it, to be honest, this time. So it doesn't really have that mirror shine in the end. There is some orange peel in the clear coat, and so it doesn't really have that mirror reflectivity, but again, it's my first single-seater. I'm just trying to learn with this project. I wasn't trying to make it into a award-winning showpiece, but I will definitely be doing so on some future IndyCar builds to make them look like they are ready to hit the track for the Indianapolis 500. The kit tires come with raised lettering for the Goodyear and Eagle writing. I grabbed this white acrylic paint pen from the store and used that to pick out the letters. If I goofed up, it was no big deal because I could take a cotton swab with a little bit of isopropyl alcohol in it and rub it off, being acrylic, and then try again. It's certainly not perfect, and I had a few goofs that I had to clean up, but in the end, I don't know, I think that it turned out okay. The white writing was pretty stark, so I toned it down with some very thin rubber black from Tamiya. I thinned it with alcohol because I was afraid that lacquer thinner might damage the rubber or vinyl tires, and you can see here that it tones it down quite nicely, I think. The suspension assembly, both front and rear on this kit, is pretty tricky. Most of the mounting points are not particularly positive in nature, and it's pretty easy to get things misaligned as I did. It's ever so slight, and even though I used 1, 2, 3 blocks and things like that to try to make sure everything was lined up, there's still some slight issues. I'm not sure if it's warped parts or more than likely it's just error on my part during assembly, but in the end, even though it's not 100% straight, it still looks okay and passable in the photos. If I was going to build this for a contest, I would probably come up with a better jig or something like that to try to ensure that all the parts were 100% aligned and straight. The video is not quite over, so don't leave yet, but I did want to take a moment to say thank you so much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed this video. I'm a big fan of single-seater racing, so this is certainly not the last one you're going to see built on the channel, so if you like what you saw, I hope you'll consider subscribing. I also wanted to say thank you again to my friend Kyle over at Arcady Scaleworks. He was a huge resource for me on this project, and I'm sure will be in the future. And he's a really great friend, so please make sure you go and check out his channel for more single-seater modeling content.